Hello, my name is Marjorie, and this is the story of my romance with Harlan. I'm 64 years old. With gray hair, I've always been proud never to die, and a soul that's learned over time to walk on its own. I've always been the kind of woman who gets things done, who faces life head-on. I drive my own car, do my shopping calmly, and enjoy taking care of my home by myself, not out of stubbornness, but by choice. I realized, after a certain age, that relying on others is a luxury we're not always afforded. And honestly, I never liked the idea of waiting around for someone to save me. When my husband passed away nearly a decade ago, solitude taught me to keep my hands steady and my heart resilient. I learned how to change a light bulb, how to speak with the bank manager, how to fix a plumbing issue. "You really handle everything on your own, Mom," my son said the other day, with a mix of pride and amazement. And I do. Not because I'm trying to prove anything to the world, but because I've grown used to trusting myself. There's a quiet freedom in that. But you know what nobody tells you? That even the strongest people get tired. That there are days when your body feels heavy, when your soul sighs for a tenderness that goes beyond a polite "good morning" at the grocery store. I feel whole, but whole doesn't mean invulnerable. Sometimes I close my eyes before falling asleep and wonder, is it wrong to long for someone's arms, even when you're so independent? A neighbor said to me the other day, laughing, "Marjorie, you're like a one-woman army." I laughed too. But inside, I felt something tighten, because there's a difference between being strong and being alone. And deep down, I just wanted someone who could see both in me, the strength and the softness. Someone who understood that yes, I know how to care, but that I also have room to be cared for. I've learned to cook just for myself, to set the table for one, to handle what needs handling without expecting help. And yet, I still leave an empty chair at the table, as if something in me still hopes for company. It's not loneliness, it's hope, and hope never grows old. This is me, Marjorie, a woman who's been through a lot, who cries in secret watching old movies, who dances alone in the living room when a favorite song comes on, someone who rebuilt herself without losing her sweetness, who loves silence but would love even more to share a quiet cup of coffee with someone who knows how to listen. I am stronger than I look, yes, but I'm also more sensitive than I let on. And maybe, just maybe, I'm ready to open up a small space in this heart that's been closed for far too long. Because the truth is, no matter how much we can handle on our own, sometimes what we long for most is someone who'll say, "Let me take care of you today." It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. I'd gone out early for groceries, just like I usually do, and on the way back, right at the corner near the pharmacy, the car began to sputter, a strange shudder, followed by a silence that made me sit up straighter. I tried to start it again. Nothing. One more try. Still nothing. I sighed deeply, tapped the steering wheel lightly with my fingertips, and muttered, "Really, car? Today of all days?" I stepped out slowly, looking around. No familiar faces nearby. It was early afternoon and the sun was beating down hard, the kind that makes your forehead sweat even if you're standing still. I called the number for the local repair shop. My neighbor had recommended it a while back. "Talk to Harlan. He fixes everything in no time," she had said. And it was him who answered. His voice was deep but calm, the kind that doesn't rush, not even to say hello. I explained what had happened and he simply replied, "I'm on my way, Miss Marjorie. Just a few minutes." And he meant it. Less than 15 minutes later, he showed up in the shop's old pickup, in a worn blue uniform with grease-stained hands. But what struck me the most wasn't the way he looked. It was the way he approached the car, gently, as if he were dealing with something fragile, as if it were a visit, not just a service call. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Mind if I take a look?" He said it with a crooked half-smile and pale eyes hidden beneath thick eyebrows. I nodded, a bit wary but curious. He opened the hood like someone opening an old window, and stood there, observing, listening, even smelling. "Right here. Looks like the belt," he said. "Have you been hearing any strange noises lately?" "Maybe. I usually play the radio loud. Sometimes I don't even notice," I replied with an awkward laugh. He smiled back, but there was no sarcasm in it. He had a gentle, contained manner, the kind of man who learned to speak only when necessary. Every time he bent down to grab a tool, his knee cracked loudly, and he'd wince just a bit. "60 doesn't show up alone, does it?" he said, glancing sideways at me. I smiled. 64 here, I said, pointing to myself, and in that instant, he looked at me differently, not with surprise, but with, recognition. He finished the repair in silence. Then he closed the hood, wiped his hands on a stained rag, and said, "All set. She'll get you home just fine now." Then he looked at me with a kindness that completely disarmed me. "You drive well, you know that. I was watching when you pulled up. Steady posture, confident. Haven't seen that in a while." I didn't know what to say. I just thanked him, feeling something unfamiliar stir in my chest. It wasn't nerves. It felt like a crack had, opened. And for some reason, the air coming through it felt good to breathe. As he put the tools away, I found myself asking, without thinking too much, "Would you like to come by for coffee one of these days?" He smiled again, with that same crooked smile, and said, "If it's fresh brewed, I'd be glad to, Miss Marjorie." And right there, at the end of a simple repair, something inside me seemed to begin, slowly, quietly, like someone turning on a soft light in a corner that had been dark for a long time. Before we go on, if this story has already touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It shows us that you believe, just like I do, that love has no age, and it helps us keep telling stories like this one. He came by the next day. I didn't even wait for the coffee to cool. I had made cornbread, the kind with anise seeds that I learned from my mother, and left the kitchen door open, like someone who pretends not to care, but actually cares a lot. I heard his heavy footsteps approaching, the slow shuffle of his boots announcing a presence without urgency. "Miss Marjorie," he called out, with that deep yet calm voice that was already starting to sound far too familiar to my heart. "Come on in, Harlan. Coffee's brewed and the cake's fresh," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my hands trembled a little. He stepped in slowly, took off his cap, and set it on the table. "You didn't have to go to the trouble," he said, sitting down, and glancing around like someone who respects a space before settling into it. "It's not trouble when you want to," I said, placing 2 cups between us. That's how the visits began, scattered, no set days, no real conversations beforehand. Sometimes he'd show up with some random excuse, just wanted to check if the car's still running fine, or brought a little jar of caramel we got at the shop. And other times, he wouldn't offer any reason at all. He just came, and I let him, because somehow, his presence filled the house without making a sound. And that, to me, was something new. He didn't talk much, but he listened like few people do. When I shared a story from my younger days, he never interrupted. He just looked, eyes slightly narrowed, lips curled in the faintest smile. "You have a beautiful way of telling things," he said once, stirring sugar into his cup. And I, who hadn't told stories to anyone but myself for years, felt seen, not just heard, seen. I noticed he paid attention to the little things. One day, he complimented the scent of the soap I used on my towels. Another day, he mentioned how he liked the light in my kitchen late in the afternoon. "Feels like a scene from an old movie," he said, leaning against the sink with his arms crossed. And I, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, simply nodded. Because in a way, he also seemed like he had stepped out of a movie, one of those we watch with a tight heart, hoping everything turns out right in the end. There were no declarations, no promises, but the silence between us started to change. It grew lighter, more intimate. He never touched me, no kisses, no long embraces. But when he stood up and quietly washed his cup before leaving, it spoke louder than 1,000 words. It was as if he was saying, "I respect your space, but I like being here." And that's when I realized he hadn't just fixed my car. He had stirred something inside me, a part of myself I'd long forgotten even existed. A quiet place, locked, away with a safety latch. And now, with each visit, each cup of coffee, each shared silence, it was like a key slowly turning, and I, without rushing, was starting to open. That day felt like any other. Fresh coffee on the table, a newly sliced piece of cake, Harlan sitting in his usual chair, hands folded in his lap, his eyes drifting across the details of my kitchen, like that space still held stories he wasn't done hearing. We didn't talk much that afternoon, not because we had nothing to say, but because silence had become its own kind of comfort between us. I was staring out the window, lost in thought, when he wiped his fingers on a cloth napkin and said, in a low voice, almost a whisper, "Can I ask you something, Marjorie?" I turned my face slowly, surprised by his more serious tone. "Of course," I said. He stayed quiet for a few moments, like he was searching for the right words, or maybe gathering the courage. Then he reached out gently, resting his fingers lightly over mine, on the table. His hand was warm, with that grounded touch of someone who's lived through a lot, yet was now approaching with tenderness. And in that moment, his fingertips on mine, he asked, "Do you still allow yourself to be cared for?" I didn't know how to answer right away. Time seemed to freeze. It was as though that question cut through everything. The years of solitude, the nights I handled it all alone, the times I swallowed tears so I wouldn't look weak. Just one sentence, but it carried the weight of an entire life. And at the same time, it felt like an invitation to let my guard down, to make room in a space that had long been all walls and no doors. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't fear or shame. It was an old emotion, almost forgotten, that feeling of truly being seen. I looked at him and saw that his eyes weren't in a hurry, weren't asking anything from me. It was just a question, but it reached a place in me no one had touched in years. "No one's asked me that in a long time," I replied, my voice barely steady. "Sometimes I think I've forgotten how." He squeezed my hand gently, still saying nothing. He didn't need to, because in that gesture, there was everything: respect, tenderness, a kind of care that didn't come to invade, but to shelter. I felt my eyes welling up, and for a second, I wanted to hide it, but I didn't, because for the first time in so many years, I wasn't ashamed to feel. "Maybe it's time to relearn," I whispered, and he nodded with a soft smile, still holding my hand. We stayed like that for a long time, saying nothing more. The world outside kept spinning, unchanged, but inside that kitchen, something had shifted. His question echoed within me for days. "Do you still allow yourself to be cared for?" And even without a full answer, my body had already said yes. A shy yes, but a real one. A yes that came from deep within. A yes that, finally, opened the door to everything that might come next. Afternoon 1. During one of our now almost ritual coffee visits, I noticed something different. He was quieter than usual. Not that he was ever chatty, but that day, he seemed far away. The tea had gone cold, the cake barely touched, and his eyes were fixed on a point outside the window, as if he were seeing something that wasn't really there. "Harlan, is everything all right?" I asked, trying not to intrude but unable to hide my concern. He took a while to respond. He breathed deeply, ran his hand slowly over the table, and finally spoke without looking at me. Today would have been my wedding anniversary. I didn't know what to say right away. My chest tightened. The pain I had only imagined until then was suddenly real, sitting right there in the chair beside him. 32 years together. We fought a lot, but we loved each other, in our own way, he continued. She passed away 7 years ago, and still, there are days it feels like just yesterday. I let the silence fill the room, out of respect. Only after a few moments did I quietly say, "It must have been a great love, to leave behind that kind of longing." He nodded with a bittersweet smile. "It was, still is, in a strange way, because missing someone, it becomes a different kind of love, you know." And I did know, because even though my story was different, I also knew loneliness. I knew what silence felt like in an empty house, the kind of absence that no one else could quite fill. But in that moment, I realized he was letting me in. Harlan, so quiet, so reserved, was showing me a part of himself he kept hidden from the world. And to me, that felt more intimate than any touch. "Sometimes I think I forgot how to love someone," he said. "I spent so long focused on the shop, on the routines, on the ticking of the clock. I forgot how to listen to my own heart." And then he looked at me, his eyes glassy but calm, and he smiled. It wasn't just any smile. It was the kind of smile that, despite all the pain, believes there might be beauty in beginning again. It was right then, seeing that tired smile so full of memory, that my heart trembled, because I understood he was making room, for me, for us, slowly, gently, with no rush, no promises. Maybe love after 60 is like that, quieter, slower, but so much deeper. And in that smile, caught between longing and hope, I saw that even with a whole past held tightly in his chest, Harlan could still smile for me. And that was the most beautiful gift he could have given me. I couldn't tell you exactly when things started to shift. There was no marked date, no stolen kiss, no sudden confession. But little by little, Harlan's presence stopped being a visit. It became part of my rhythm. He'd show up, always with that calm manner, sometimes with fresh bread, other times with nothing but silence. And still, without saying much, I understood. We were building something, a kind of bond that doesn't get announced. It's just felt. Our afternoon coffees became a ritual of sorts. I'd brew the grounds with more care, choose the tablecloth more thoughtfully, even cut the cornbread into smaller pieces, as if to stretch out our time together. But the funny thing was, we didn't always talk much. Some days, silence was our best conversation. He'd stir his sugar slowly, glance out at the backyard, and I'd simply watch the way he breathed. And somehow, it felt like everything was being said. "This backyard of yours smells like something good," he said, one day, eyeing my pots of basil and mint. "Smells like a life that's simple and real." I smiled, feeling a warm softness in my chest. Harlan didn't hand out compliments often, but when he did, they stuck. It was like receiving invisible flowers, but somehow even more honest. And just like that, without any fuss, he became part of things. Not like someone barging in, but like someone gently fitting into place. One afternoon, he showed up with a screw and a pair of pliers, said the cabinet door in the hallway was loose. I hadn't even noticed, but he had. And without asking for anything, he went over, knelt on the floor, fixed it quietly, and then washed his hands at the sink like it was the most natural thing in the world. "There are things we take care of simply because we care," he said, drying his hands with an old kitchen towel. And I just nodded, feeling that familiar lump in my throat, the kind that comes when you feel deeply understood. It wasn't some overwhelming, sweeping passion. It wasn't that movie kind of love that explodes at first glance. It was a love that grew slowly, like a plant you don't even notice sprouting until one day it's just there, strong, rooted, real, between one cup of coffee and the next. Between comfortable silences and glances that said more than words ever could, we found our way to each other. No rush, no pressure. No one saw it begin, not even us maybe, but somehow it was already there, in the way he pulled the chair out for me, in how he always placed the sugar on my side of the table, knowing I liked just a little, in the quiet care with which he folded the napkin before leaving. I thought I'd lived it all. That love, for me, was a thing of the past, a beautiful memory kept in a little box deep inside, alongside old letters and faded photographs. After 60, you get used to the idea that the heart has settled, that the days will be quieter, that routine is enough company, and I had made peace with that, until Harlan. It didn't happen all at once. There were no butterflies like in your 20s, no nervous thrill of hidden notes. It was something calmer, a feeling that grew with both feet on the ground and the heart in hand. First came the care, then the presence, and finally, that quiet certainty that he was staying, not just in my home, but in me. I found myself thinking about him while chopping vegetables, organizing cabinets, or laying my head on the pillow. It was as if he had settled into every corner of my routine, not barging in, not disturbing anything, just fitting in. And then, one day, out of nowhere, I said out loud, just to myself, "Marjorie, you're falling in love, darling." And I cried, not out of sadness, but the kind of tears that soften the parts of you time had made hard. Because with that realization came fear. Fear of losing the freedom I spent years building. Fear of giving too much and getting hurt. Fear of being loved and forgetting how to love in return. But something bigger than fear also came. A desire to live this, with him, in our own way. No hurry, no pressure, just living. Because love, when it comes after a whole life of battles and learning, doesn't arrive to shake you. It arrives to add to what you already are. One day, while we were having coffee out on the porch, he said, "Life has taken a lot from me, Marjorie, but maybe it's slowly giving me pieces back." I smiled and answered, "I think it's giving us a new chance. The kind you don't even ask for, but thank the universe for every day." And that's what I feel. Gratitude. For finding love when I least expected it. For realizing that even a seasoned heart still knows how to be enchanted. For learning that there's no such thing as the right age to feel butterflies. Only the courage to open the window and let them in. Today, at 64, I can say it with certainty. I've fallen in love again. And it wasn't the kind of love that sweeps you off your feet. It was the kind that takes your hand and walks beside you. A love that respected my timing, my story, my wounds. A love that taught me it's never too late to bloom. And if you, listening to me now, think you've lived everything there is to live, let me tell you this. Love doesn't have an expiration date. Sometimes it's just waiting for us to leave the door slightly open. Because when the heart blooms again, oh my friend, the whole world takes on a different scent. If this story moved you, if at any moment you saw yourself in me or thought of someone who deserves a love like this, then subscribe to the channel and leave your like. It's not just about supporting. It's about showing that there's still space for mature love, for hope, and for new beginnings. And who knows, maybe with one simple click, you'll inspire someone else to believe again.